Good evening, everyone. My name is Chrissi Kelly, and I'm the founder of Absent. And welcome to tonight's webinar on what happens when we start feeling stuck during our recovery from smell loss. I am delighted to have three patients, COVID-19 recovery stories, if you like, from the Absent Network. And I would like to introduce them to you. So tonight we've got Jen DeStasio. So Jen, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's lovely to have you. And we have Susan Spall.
Hi, I'm grateful to be here, and I'm really interested to hear what everyone has to say.
Great. And finally, Stephanie.
Hello, it's lovely to be with you all, and it's going to be great to share and hear your stories too.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you all for joining. It's really so important for us to have people on these webinars, patients who can tell their stories, because these stories are a very important testament to what's going on in the lives of people who've lost their sense of smell. So really, really wonderful that we can do this. So I think we'll start off by having you each tell us a little bit about your timeline, when you had COVID and kind of what happened next. So Stephanie, let's start with you and hear what happened to you.
Okay, well, it's been a long time. So I had the first round of COVID back in the 1st of November 2020. I remember clearly the Monday afternoon where I started a meal, and halfway through it, I could no longer taste the dessert. But I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, well, that's COVID, and it'll be back again in a week, 2 weeks. 3 months later, I had anosmia, total loss of taste and smell for 3 months, except for lemon zest and orange zest for some reason. And I made myself a dessert every single day full of lemon zest and orange zest. And then after 3 months, I had about 2 weeks where some very weak flavors started to come back. It didn't last very long, because then suddenly I was hit with something that I've since found out to be called parosmia. Never heard of it before, and began to do some research. And the following 6 months, things just got worse and worse and worse. And the smells got worse. And I just thank God for absence, because without absence, I would not have known what was happening to me at all.
Right.
So I've, sorry.
No, I just said, yeah, I was just agreeing with you.
So I've had parosmia now for 13 months. So in total, I'm heading towards the 17-month mark. In that journey of parosmia, I've gone through the most revolting smells, revolting tastes. Still, there are many, many things I have no flavor with at all. I have not many things that are actually true to what they were before COVID, perhaps about 10, 15 things. But those things, the flavors are now beginning to get a little bit stronger. But I'm just waiting and praying for other smells and other tastes to come back normally, especially things like air, smelling air and filling the car up with petrol.
Right.
That's probably one of the most revolting things I have to do, is put petrol in my car.
No, can I just ask you, Stephanie, when you say the smell of air, are you talking about, I don't know, let's say the smell of rain, or the smell of a bonfire, or are you talking in the simplest sense, the most basic sense, that fresh air smells disgusting to you?
When I was at my worst, every time I was outside, fresh air smelled like some kind of sweet bleach. Now, when it rains, I get that sweet bleach, but after a few sniffs, perhaps 5-10 minutes, it diminishes, and there's actually nothing. So I'm hoping that this is a next phase towards perhaps normal rain smells. The diesel, the petrol is exactly the same, only stronger. Very different. It's not unpleasant, but it's not as it should be. Yeah, so.
Great. Well, thank you, Stephanie. Susan, let's hear about your story.
I had COVID in February 2020, and it was a fairly mild case. I felt like I had flu, I had a fever, but I didn't ever have a cough. My joints ached terribly, and I had one of the worst headaches I've ever had.
Mm.
It was just dreadful for about 2 weeks. And then after about 4 weeks, I came back home, and my husband had cooked dinner for me. And I thought, no, this just doesn't taste. It doesn't taste right. He must have forgotten to brown the meat, or put the seasoning in. So and he tasted it as well. And then he couldn't taste it either. And we both realized that we'd had COVID and we'd lost our sense of taste. And for me, I write cookbooks and test recipes and develop products for supermarkets. So this was just a life-changing, devastating moment.
Oh dear.
Then after a few months, I felt it was my sense of taste and smell were coming back, but they would come and go. So it would be one step forward, two steps back, and that became very upsetting. And I also had parosmia, not for very long though, fortunately, because I think that is almost the worst state to be in, when you have everything smells like petrol or smoke, or a glass of wine tastes like liquid plastic, for example. And that was really tough. But that started to go away, and I had a bit of phantosmia as well, where I'd smell all kinds of wild things, and my husband would say, well, I can't smell that. And I'm like, okay. I also went through the phase where I couldn't stand the smell of myself. So I was taking showers 3 times a day, testing every kind of deodorant and perfume I could, just to kind of get rid of this horrible smell. And the bathroom smell started smelling great, and the rubbish was sweet smelling. And so I just felt like I was going rather crazy. But I was fortunate to find absinthe in May 2020. So I found it very early on, and I found listening to people's stories and participating in the forums very helpful in terms of going forward. Later on, I think November 2020, when we were locked down again in England for a month, I found that was the toughest time, because I realized I wasn't really recovered. And I kept thinking, well, is this going to be like this forever and ever? Do I have to totally change my life and give up enjoying food and cooking and entertaining? And that was a tough time. And I think, Chrissi, you mentioned you had this period of being stuck for quite a long time. And I think now I'm better. I had COVID again in January 2021.
Right.
And
did you feel that you had a setback from that in your taste and smell?
Yeah, that was definitely a big setback, but it came back much quicker the second time, because I was aware of what was happening, and I was doing smell training, and I realized that if it just got to be too much, I could just go out for a walk and forget about it, and then try again tomorrow. And I started trying little tricks, like putting a bar of rose scented soap on my bedside table. So if I felt I needed a whiff of something, I just opened the drawer. Yeah, I can smell it.
I have things in my bedside drawer that I do exactly that with. A couple of favorite things in there that, and one of them I use, that, which is sort of my general barometer of how good is my sense of smell. And it's something that I just love the smell. It's a little pot of lip salve that smells like pine trees. And I just love this stuff. And I can remember the day after my 3rd case of COVID, when I, took it out at night, and there was just nothing.
Oh, sad.
But we're going to get onto that, those horrible moments. So thank you, Susan. And just remind me, early into 2021, you had the 2nd case of COVID, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
What month was February, January?
January 2021.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Oh, go ahead.
That seems to be a fairly typical pattern.
Yeah.
And then I had my first vaccination in February, and then the 2nd in April. And after that, I noticed things started to get better. Whether or not it was related to the vaccine or not, I don't know, but I was aware of that.
Right. Okay. Right. And Jen, let's hear from you now.
Oh, hello. All right. So, as we all remember that horrible day, October 18th of 2020, got up in the morning. I was painting a guest room and working on just around the house. I had no ill feelings at all. I was just like, wow, this paint doesn't smell very strong, but I just went, I thought maybe I had the low VOC paint. And then my mom called and wanted me to come out and visit. And I was like, oh, mom. And she was just diagnosed with cancer. I'm like, I don't know if I should. I'm like, my nose is kind of running. I don't know if I'm getting a cold or what. She's like, it'll be fine. We'll stay apart. We'll wear our masks, blah, blah, blah. So we go out and sitting there, and she goes and grabs some hummus and chips, and we're both eating it. And she's like, wow, this is really garlicky. I'm like, this is garlic? Smelled it, could smell nothing, ran around the house, start smelling everything. I'm like, I can't smell anything. And I'm like, I've got COVID. I'm like, I'm leaving. So she's like, well, you've already been here. You might as well eat dinner. So I'm standing in the corner eating and didn't taste anything at that point. And after that, I went home and that was it. I lost complete smell and taste. Well, could taste sweet, salty. That was about it. Could not smell anything. And so that was mid-October. And every night I'd wake up and I had this candle by my bed. I'd try to smell it. And I always had the nose of a bloodhound, could smell anything and everything very, very strongly, and couldn't smell it. And thankfully it was beautiful out, so I could stay away from my husband and son. Unfortunately, they both got it too. My husband did lose his smell and taste, but only briefly. Son, not one symptom at all. And I pretty much felt fine the entire time, just couldn't smell and taste. And then the first thing I noticed that didn't smell right was coffee and bathroom smells. They smelled the same. All food smelled exactly the same as bathroom smells. And come January, I remember I could drink wine at that point, and it seemed to taste fine. Didn't, maybe a glass or two on the weekends. So, but I remember one night I was drinking it and it just smelled rancid, and I put a napkin over the top of it and a straw in it and then tried taking a sip. I'm like, nope. And so that was mid-January. And from then on, everything was horrible. All food, drinks, tasted bad, smelled bad. And so it's been since January of 2021. And
where, Jen, where are you now in the sort of in the timeline? Would you say that you're aware of some improvement, or characterize that for me a little bit?
I'd have to say I've improved greatly in a sense that I can smell and taste everything, but
Right.
nothing is normal or as it should. I'd say maybe vanilla is the most normal smelling and tasting. Like fake candle, evergreen stuff, I can kind of get a hint of that, but like at Christmas, I could not smell any fresh pine unless I squished it in my fingers. Every time I went past a Christmas tree, I'd take a sprig off and squish it and smell it. But there's nothing that is normal, like the fresh air. Like I really want to smell fresh air normal, like go outside and smell it, whether it's rained or snow or it's sunny and warm. And coffee, I can smell coffee. Coffee finally does not smell horrible anymore, but it's not normal. I mean, I can brew a pot of coffee and don't have to take my coffee maker outside, which is what I did for a long time. And as for eating things, I'm to the point now where not everything is disgusting at the very first bite. But a lot of things, I still have to take 3 bites before it's tolerable, but it's still not the same. Like I just had a cheese stick a little while ago. I was starving and took a bite and it just tasted like rotten milk, like it had gone bad. By the 3rd bite, I could eat it, and I put some raw almonds with it. And like raw almond is like the only type of nut thing that I could have. Peanut butter and roasted things are really bad. So.
Okay, thank you. And Susan, what about, where are you right now with, your eating, your parosmia, etc., and how do you compare that to, let's say, the worst part of the initial phase?
I think that many of my sense of smell and taste have come back, most of it, but I don't have the nuance. For example, in one of your seminars, you were talking about being able to differentiate between an orange peel and a tangerine. And I certainly don't think I could do that. So I don't think I'm fully recovered. Also, recently I had a cataract replacement. And when I had that, I had a lot of swelling all in my sinuses, all like this, and in my eyeball. And I lost my sense of smell and taste again. It was just totally gone for 2 weeks. And so I'm in a sort of odd position that I've had another incident, but it seems to be coming back pretty quickly now. So I'm not too worried about it.
Right. Well, that's good to hear. And Stephanie, what about you?
I am noticing progress, actually, certainly in taste. Some things are now like vanilla, coconut, cinnamon, carrot cake, things like that. A lot of fattening things, sadly, are giving me more flavour. So, of course, I'm making more fattening things and perhaps gaining a little bit of weight because it's such a pleasurable thing to have some flavour.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually lost, I think what you call Chrissi true taste, which is sweet, savoury, umami.
That's right.
But I lost flavour.
Yeah.
And it's the flavours that I really would like to have more flavours. I'm okay with sugar, etc., no problem. But I found that something that I can do, and I think I got this from one of your webinars, I'm not sure, but I have developed a very strange habit that I have to tell my friends when I'm out eating with them. I just, well, you probably all know it, you squeeze your nose, you take a few bites, because obviously there's no flavour when you squeeze your nose, then just let it go quickly. And quite often now I've noticed I get a brief, true flavour. It's quite weak. It doesn't last very long, but it's there. And that at the moment, I have to explain to my lovely friends why I'm doing it. It's not because they smell or anything. It's because I'm trying to get flavour from their food. And that's really helped. And I think since I've been doing that, I've seen a little bit more progress, actually. So whether that's just coincidental, I don't know. It's more my smell now. So sorry.
That's an interesting one. I'll have to speak to one of my sort of scientific advisors to see what they think might be behind that. I mean, certainly if you're plugging your nose, what you're doing is you are allowing a concentration of this very, the air that's in your mouth that you're chewing. So the food goes around a bit like in a washing machine, and the volatile molecules that give food its smell are going around in your mouth with it. And by plugging the nose, you're kind of like damming, blocking, creating a dam, if you like, and letting all that sort of air with a strong scent in it kind of accumulate at the place where smelling would happen. So that's the sort of one thing I can think of. But for anyone who is listening to this right now and who doesn't understand the background of what we're talking about, Stephanie has described what's called retronasal olfaction, and that's when you smell through the mouth. That's why it's called retronasal. And this is what gives food its unique flavor. So we've got, unfortunately, we have this word taste, and it's got 2 very distinct meanings. And when I talk about it here in the absent webinars and in all the work that I do, I call true taste is what I describe, is the word that I use to describe salty, sweet, sour, bitter, and umami. And these are things that you are, the inside of your mouth has receptors, and they are responding to the pH, for instance, of the food in your mouth, and sending message to your brain about whether or not it's sour. True taste really needs to be differentiated from the flavor, and that's what we call taste in a colloquial sense. And that flavor is a magic combination of a smell, either through the nostrils or through the mouth, the retronasal olfaction, and true taste. And when you're having those experiences exactly at the same moment, your brain combines them and says, this is a beautifully cooked steak with some béarnaise sauce on it, for instance. And, you know, that is what you call the nuance, Stephanie. That is what makes that food unique. So it's also what differentiates a raspberry from a piece of melon. So it's really important that you all understand the difference between true taste and flavor, that is, so that you can understand a little bit about what's going wrong when we've lost our sense of smell. And that's why so often people say, they go to the doctor and they say, I can't taste my food. So that's what's behind that. So thank you for that vivid description, Stephanie. This webinar is entitled, What Happens When You Get Stuck? And it came up on Twitter with a lovely lady I'd been interacting with called April, and she was talking about feeling stuck, and it just rang a bell in my head because as I'm sure most of you know, I lost my sense of smell the first time in 2012, and I had a very, very long kind of recovery time. And it was, so 2 years of parosmia, just really not being able to eat at all and having no interest in food and no appetite. And then I kind of turned a corner in 2014, not in a big way, but just starting to notice that some things were better. But I got into this sort of doldrums, and I noticed that there were things that I could smell, but I didn't feel like they were contributing to my quality of life. And I should have felt happy about that, about my sense of smell improving. And yet somehow I didn't feel happy. And so I wonder was that the same for any of you?
Yes, I completely am there, because there are things now that smell good to me. Believe it or not, cigarette smoke. I like the smell of true cigarette smoke. In my whole life, since I was a child, cigarettes were vile. I mean, I was like allergic to it. And now that is unfortunately my phantom smell that I usually get while I'm sitting on the couch at night. I feel like my husband sitting next to me smoking a cigarette. That's what it smells like. And it's terrible. But if I'm out in public and somebody is smoking a cigarette, I'm like, oh, that smells good. I can hang out near that. And, so there are lots of things that do smell pleasant now. I just know it's not their true smell. And it's just sad. Like, you know, it's just unfortunate.
It is that sadness, actually. I find, you know, I walk the dogs twice a day here, and we have a lot of chimneys here. We kind of live in a remote area, so people rely on chimneys rather than your normal radiators and things. And I can smell the smoke from a long way away. My husband can't smell it. But as you said, it's actually quite pleasant now. I've got used to it. It's a kind of sweet, mild chemical. But at the same time, I'm thinking, how much longer? So there's kind of like, I can deal with it, but how much longer? I really want things to get back to normal. And I think a big sadness for me at the moment is this time last year, in the run up to spring, I was convinced that I'd be normal in summer and that I would smell the heat hitting the tarmac and, you know, those normal smells, the smells of nature. And here I am a year later, like all of you and many listening, that we're still in the same boat and we're facing another spring with the same issues. And I find that sad. So you have to distract yourself and think of all the good things.
Right.
Otherwise you can go down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Susan.
One thing I found that has helped me that I've started recently is nasal rinsing, and with a saline rinse, and using a sort of anti-allergy nasal spray after that. That's really helped me quite a lot in keeping things at more of a steady or a steady keel. Whereas before, one day it would be great, I could smell things again, and the next 2 days I couldn't smell anything at all, and the food had no flavor. And I found that when I was going through the stage when the food didn't have any flavor, I was just eating as fast as possible because it wasn't getting any pleasure from it. And that's really, really depressing to be in that point. But now it's better, I think. But it's been a long haul.
Well, it sounds to me like you've all experienced that, this sort of objective knowledge that you are improving. You can see that, or you can smell that, and yet it doesn't feel like things are right yet. So, and that's just so typical of the pattern. So let's talk about a few issues. Number one, I think that, Stephanie, the sadness that you experienced last year about thinking, oh, it's going to be okay until the summertime, and then it wasn't. That's very real. And when people come into the network or onto the Facebook page, we try and prepare people that it's not going to be a quick recovery. And so I hope that message is getting out there so that people don't have unrealistic expectations. I remember one occasion when I was talking to a woman about smell training, and she said, well, if I start it now, do you think I'll be okay on the weekend? And I thought, oh, bless you. No.
I know. When you see people come on and they're like, oh, it's been 13 days.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I want to be like, oh, stop, try 13 months. But we all were there, and we all thought like, okay, another week.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think, I certainly felt it, and I see it every day, that there is an upwelling of anxiety in these first months as people are noticing what's going on, and then they're noticing that it's not getting better, and 2 weeks turn into 3, and 3 weeks turn into 3 months, and you're thinking, is this going to be my life? And I think that anxiety that people feel is like, I like to think of it as a separate package of misery all by itself. And I want to just sort of put it over there on the table, and then think about what's actually happening in my nose, for instance, because I've had 3 cases of COVID, and the last one was the one that really was a doozy for me and completely wiped out my sense of smell, absolutely everything. The previous 2 cases took away a lot, but there was a little bit of something there. This time, there was nothing. And it's that anxiety that it just drives all kinds of really negative emotions. And we're hoping to actually do a webinar on that sometime in the future. But let's stick with the feeling stuck thing. I think that what I'd like to tell you a little bit about now is something that we know that was well established before the pandemic started, which is the relationship between smell loss and well-being, and loss of well-being, in fact, or even the relationship between smell and well-being. When you have a good sense of smell and you are smelling things regularly, these volatile molecules, of course, they go into your nostrils, and then they touch the receptors that are inside high here in the upper airway, And then those receptors send a little electrical signal to the olfactory bulbs, which are inside the brain. And then the olfactory bulbs, through a mechanism that we still don't quite understand, then projects that impulse further up into the brain, and that fires then, for instance, we can recognize the concept of the smell, the identification of it. We might have memories might be triggered by it. It might raise in us certain emotions. And I'd like you all to think about a treasured smell memory, whether it was when you were in school cafeteria or at your grandparents for Christmas or whatever it was. And I am pretty sure that that memory will be associated with a very strong emotion. And smell and emotion are really two sides of the same coin. So that's a really interesting and important thing to bear in mind. So when you stop smelling the normal way, through your nostrils or through your mouth, you are no longer sending messages into the olfactory bulbs. And like any other part of the body, if you don't use it, you start to lose it. So the olfactory bulbs begin to lose volume slowly. And loss of olfactory bulb volume is strongly correlated with loss of well-being and depression. So it's not I think it's a lot of people say, oh, well, you're just depressed because you can't taste your food. Yes, there's that. There is a bereavement over having lost your sense of smell. And you are really experiencing grief. In the classical sense of grief, I don't know if any of you have ever seen the Kubler-Ross sort of diagram of grief and how it progresses to acceptance. And first there's anger and then there's acceptance. We're all definitely doing that. But also, losing the sense of smell is sort of slightly rearranging your brain a little bit. And so there are two ways that this is affecting your well-being. And you know, so many people say, well, I feel like all the emotion has been drained out of my life. The world seems very gray. And all of this is consistent with this idea that losing the sense of smell is going to diminish the olfactory bulbs a little bit and make people feel less well than they would normally. So keep that in your mind. And then of course, what I always talk about whenever I'm discussing smell training is that the good news is that the body is plastic, or the brain is plastic, and the olfactory bulbs can be helped by having messages sent into them from the higher part of the brain. And that's what's behind this idea that when you smell train, you must concentrate, you must be mindful, try and recall memories, try and recall emotions that might be associated with those things. So that is why we do smell training the way we do. And that's trying to bring some life back into the olfactory bulbs. And so there's good evidence for this. And that's obviously why we recommend it. What I don't know, and I'm not sure anyone has ever looked into this, is how long does it take for consistent smell training to actually send enough messages into the olfactory bulb to actually get things to improve? And we also know that there's a hypothesis that smell training also changes things a little bit in the olfactory epithelium, which is that patch of tissue that you smell train with. So there are all kinds of good things that happen when we smell train. And the question is, or what I've thought to myself is, maybe we are in this sort of stuck phase. Things are improving, but what if they're not improved enough to help those feelings of well-being reestablish themselves? So that there's kind of, there seems to be a sort of lag in the first you have the improvement in the sense of smell, and then you have the improvement following later with well-being. And I'm just wondering what you feel about that. Have you experienced any of those kind of things that I've described? What's your response to that? Stephanie, any thoughts?
Well, the worst period I had for low well-being, if you like, was when I live in France and my husband was living in the UK, and we'd waited a long time for him to get a job and to come and join me in France. But when he came, he actually came, because of COVID, we hadn't seen each other for a long, long time anyway. And when he came, he was actually quite shocked at how I'd completely lost motivation for cooking. I love cooking, and I've always cooked regularly. I cook a lot with caramelized onion and garlic. I haven't done that for 16 months now. And he was quite worried because he saw me sitting on the sofa there after work, no enthusiasm to cook. And that was quite a difficult period. He was worried. So I used to give him all sorts of weird mixes, coconut vanilla on top of a piece of pasta, you know, cold food. I've had coconut on top of smoked salmon, served with carrot cake, all sorts of weird combinations that I'll just do and say, there you go, you know. But thankfully he's very kind and very patient. But that was probably my worst. I think the secret is, for me, is having a full life, because you know, I work full time. I'm also a musician. We do lots of concerts and rehearsals and things like that. So I am very, very, very busy. And if I weren't busy in the day, in the evening, at weekends, I think there could have been moments perhaps when my mind could focus on it too much, and I could really end up with yeah, not feeling too good. But going back to associations, smells, for me the hardest really is not being able to smell the sun on tarmac, because this is a childhood memory from my parents' home in the hot summers in Solihull in the Midlands. I would walk out of the door and just love that smell of summer. And that's for me the biggest grief, is to not smell summer. So I'm still hoping, I'm still hopeful that it will happen this year, but I'm more realistic now. Yeah.
I feel like that it's like having amnesia, and you know, you have forgotten like all those wonderful things in your life, or like having Alzheimer's, and like you can't, you know, that all those smells that you grew up with that bring you so much joy and emotion, you know that you don't have them anymore, as opposed to like some people, like, well, they just don't even remember what it smelled like to walk into their parents' home, or to walk down by the lake in the summer. You know, it's like, you know, that smell is gone and the emotion is gone with it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, here I am. It's nice and all. It doesn't smell bad, but you don't have that same joy from your memory.
I think I feel some post-traumatic stress disorder that is lurking around, that I'm worried it will come back and that I won't be able to smell things again. And that there's just an edge of an anxiety there at certain times, which I worry about. And I've had my sense of smell come and go several times. And I know I've felt the joy though when I could smell the grass in the park being cut, or I could smell the jasmine suddenly that had bloomed over, you know, the weekend. But there's just a little inkling there that I think, oh, maybe it's going to go again, and I shouldn't really put myself forward and try to do very much cooking because it might not be very good. And I used to be able to smell, I could bake cookies or bake a cake, and I could tell the perfect instant when the browning reaction occurred, and I could take it out of the oven, and that was it. I never set a timer, I just could smell it. And I've burnt a lot of things since I've lost my sense of smell, and that was hard. That it was very upsetting.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I remember that clearly. You know, I mean, was also an extremely keen cook. I still am, in my own way, you know, again, weird combinations. But I can remember in the beginning, you know, even things like trying to roast a chicken. This is before I had parosmia, and just thinking, you know, just burning the chicken or undercooking it, and just wasn't my old self in the kitchen. But, you know, Jen, what you were saying about memories, I think that, I mean, I have incredible recall now for all kinds of smells from my childhood, from recently. And I think that that is definitely a something that you can train yourself to do. It is, you know, I mean, I never really had particularly strong smell memories, or I wasn't able to kind of conjure them up in my mind. I mean, really conjure them up to the extent that I was absolutely right there in the moment. And I think that's like a muscle that you can build, because I'm able to do that now very easily. And I wonder whether that's what's made me able to kind of cope a bit more with what's going on, than you know, when I first started, and I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah, I remember you saying that a lot in other things that I've listened to. And it scares me because even though I know like what fresh cut, I know the feeling of how fresh cut grass smelled to me, how that smell made me feel. I can't think of it in my head right now as what it is. I don't know what it is.
Am I right if I say you can't feel the emotion of cut grass?
Right. Like I could before. I know I had a great emotional attachment to the summer and fresh cut grass. Love that smell. But now I don't know. But there have been in the past, you know, since 2020, there have been maybe 4 instances where I've smelled an environmental smell for a split second. And I knew automatically what it was. And it brought like this tingling, crazy endorphin rush. Like whether I was laying on my back deck on a summer night and like that, I smelled fresh air. I'd come in, I'm like, I smelled fresh air. And it was amazing. It was, or I smelled cedar on a pergola. So just about 4 times, and those smells were there and then it went away and I haven't had them since. So
I think sometimes, I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of avoidance. So for example, roast chicken and stuffing, cranberry sauce, those conjure up the most amazing smells and memories for me because they were meals that my mother always cooked. And now, because I know I've read posts, I've heard that chicken is really bad, I'm scared to even try it. So I've not bought a chicken now for well over a year. So that's probably wrong on my part. I don't quite know how to handle that. Yeah. And the same with cutting the grass, actually. I'm thinking, oh, it's growing now. But part of me wants to avoid taking the mower out and cutting it because I don't want to know what it smells like.
Stephanie, you haven't been in any other locations where somebody else has been roasting or cooking a chicken, like not into a public restaurant or anything?
Yes, I have, and it's been pretty awful.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So then you would not try cooking it yourself. Yeah,
yes.
it stinks. Yeah.
I would say to all of you, you know, my journey has been much longer than yours. Mine is now 10 years, and you will come out of this period eventually. And it's, you know, it's really difficult where you are right now because you want to continue to motivate yourself to continue with smell training. Or Susan, you've been nasal rinsing. That's a great idea. And using steroids, using steroid sprays, is that right? Yeah. They are recommended in some cases. So I think, and by the way, are all of you still smell training, or have you stopped smell training?
I think I always smell train. It's just part of my life now. And
Yeah.
when I'm having a good day, I go to Zara Home and I smell all the candles.
Yeah.
I smell things that are just, you know, in the cupboard. If I am cooking things or we light candles, I will smell them. But I don't anymore make a conscious effort to smell the essential oils because I find it quite depressing after about 10 months of doing it.
Sure, sure. I get that. I get that.
I have my smell training kit, the 4 original scents, the clove, the eucalyptus, lemon, and
Rose.
rose. So I now can smell every single one of those, but I don't think they are true smells.
Yeah.
Like the rose thing, I can smell it. I just don't think it's close to what a rose smells like. And the clove, I mean, that was the first one I could smell, very powerful. And then I get the jar of the crushed clove out of my spice, and I can smell that. And that smells better to me than the jars. The jars are now more chemical and artificial, but I can smell all of them. And I even have my, I'll just take orange peels or lemon peels and squish them on my fingers and smell them like that. And I can smell it, but it's like, is this really lemon? I don't know.
Now, Stephanie, was it you that was mentioning about nuance, or was that Susan?
I mentioned that about the orange versus the tangerine.
Right, right. I think, I mean, the way you describe it, Susan, I think you have a reasonably good threshold right now. And I think you might surprise yourself if you tried doing some exercises with a couple of different citrus essential oils. You may be aware that the essential oil in citrus is always in the peel. Yes. That's why we use rind in cooking and things like that. So, and it's not always practical to use, you know, fruits all the time, because, you know, you pull off the peel and then the rest of the piece of fruit is shot to pieces. So either you eat all 3, you know, a lemon, a tangerine, and an orange every day, or you get some essential oils. But my guess is that you could very quickly learn the difference between several different citrus essential oils. So try that. I mean, I know that everyone gets fed up with smell training, and they get fed up with hearing me talk about smell training. But I would say this, it's the phrase smell training was what killed it, because it sounds like too much work. It sounds like you've got to go to the gym to do it. And it really should, that's a misnomer, really, because it should be called smell awareness. Because what we're not doing is forcing you to do one routine twice a day, but we're trying to introduce a natural curiosity about what things smell like in your environment. And that's where the awareness comes in. So, you know, as one of you said, you know, or it's candles, or it's it's your scented lip balm, or it's one thing that I like to do is to take these little packets of tissues that you keep in your pocket and pull open the top and then put essential oils on the folded edge, so that every time you take out your tissue, you've got the flavor of the month. And that is just a moment in your day when you go to blow your nose or do something else with the tissue, and you think, oh, what can I smell? So there are 101 opportunities to do that every day. And that's what I would hope that anybody who's in this situation as you are would do, in order to just keep stimulating the sense of smell.
Yeah. Every time anytime I go outside, anywhere, I try to really inhale deeply and smell the air, just all the time, every time I walk outside. Just really want those environmental smells back.
Yeah.
I cover my scarves with perfume, so I have 4 scarves, and a little bit too much, I'm told. But, that it does help, actually, and it lasts. They're not like you said, Jen. I can smell great things sometimes, but I know they're not normal. But it's such a pleasure to have some kind of pleasant smell.
Yeah, at least, you know, it's like, at least we are smelling something. At least we're smelling something. Unfortunately, all perfumes smell the same.
Oh, yeah.
fine, but they all smell the same.
I know exactly what you mean. I've keep mentioning this to my research colleague Jane, and she's a food chemist, but she knows all about the individual's odorant molecules that are in things, whether it's food or perfume or whatever. And I said, Jane, there's just something weird about the perfume department in a big department store. What is it that they put into perfume that is just making me go, no? And lighter fragrances that are, that come from the kind of places that make, eau de cologne or some sort of body spray or whatever, that are like all natural, sort of made with essential oils, or less commercial perfumey type products, are much better for me than the classic perfume.
Yeah, Joe Malone brand, which is a rather expensive brand. I went and smelled all of theirs and they all smell lovely, but I'm like, I'm not buying this until I know this is what it's really supposed to smell like.
I think one of the things, going back to well-being as well, is when you look at your friends, you're invited out to your friends, and the time has gone on. It's been so long now that now it's kind of thinking, how do I say, or what do I say to them when they say things to me like, you're going to taste this now. We've been to England and bought Cathedral City vintage cheddar, and we're going to make for you a vindaloo curry. They're lovely, lovely friends. They mean well, but you kind of, after 16 months, your heart sinks because you think, thank you very much. My mouth is going to burn, but I'm not going to have any flavour still, on those two particular things. So that kind of contributes to well-being not being where it should be, really. You have these lovely friends and you just want to say, thank you so much. I can taste it. It's beautiful, which I do, actually. I say that. But inside, you've got a burning mouth and not a lot else. So any advice on that,
And that, you've picked up a point about how smell loss affects our relationships with other people, which is not inconsiderable. I mean, that's a real thing that weighs on your mind, that when you sit down with people that you like, that you can't participate in the exchange of food, which is elemental to who we are as human beings, getting together and eating. Or you imagine, a mother cooking food for her children. I mean, it's the glue that holds this whole social thing together. And so, of course, that is a real burden. I mean, if you think about all the activities that go into getting food from the shopping basket or the garden even onto the table, you've got to go to the grocery store, you've got to pick it out, you've got to put it in a bag afterward and obviously pay for it, take it home, put it away, prepare it, take out the knife, cut up the onion. I mean, just think about all of the opportunities for yuck in that list of things that that go right up to the moment where you put it into your mouth. And it's not just about the eating, it's about all the other things that go with the eating. And that includes people's disturbed, unfortunately, very disturbed relationships with sometimes with their friends and family.
Yeah, it's so hard to, friends want to go out to eat or have you over, and then they're like, oh, what about sushi? And I'm like, no, can't do that. No. And they're like, but I thought you liked sushi. Well, I did like sushi. And then I did go out with friends and I told like all these people, I'm like, oh, that meal was wonderful. They're like, oh, you can taste now. And I'm like, for the 70 millionth time, I can taste everything. It just doesn't taste good.
Exactly.
I remember the first time I met some friends and went to a restaurant. It was for a brunch in London. And I got there and I realized that practically everything had eggs in it. And I was really close to walking out because I just can't deal with eggs at all. And I managed to find something without eggs, and I managed to eat it, but it was tough.
Yeah.
So
You don't
I'm,
know what to say to people, do you? When people, they're very kind, they ring you up and say, well, what can you eat? And
Yeah.
certainly in the middle of parosmia, when it does change a lot, it's so different to somebody who perhaps has a gluten intolerance, because that's, you know what you can and can't eat. But when parosmia is at its worst, it changes so regularly.
Every day.
Now it's a little more stable, but yeah.
Yesterday I had to choke down a granola bar. I mean, I'm like, this is so disgusting. And today I ate it and it was fine. Like I could eat it and I was like, whoa. So it constantly changes.
that's tough.
But we're getting to the end, but I just wanted to close on a hopeful note, and that is, I think that, and Simon, who I'm sure you all know, Simon Ging, we've spoken often about how over time the brain starts to fill in the gaps. So in the same way that visually, if you look at a picture quickly, you wouldn't notice that some things were missing, and that your brain is filling in the background on that. And I think that that's what's happening for people in their sort of recovery, and they feel better. And that's because the brain may also be doing its bit to reinforce whatever your perceptions are. It's true that for a lot of people, the sense of smell will remain, let's say, diminished to a certain extent, or just different. For many people, the threshold comes back completely, but things are just not quite the same. And I think that, again, in time, you can get used to that. Certainly when so it was 8 years from the initial loss to the point where I had COVID the first time. And I always said that my sense of smell gave me a greater quality of, made me happier than my old sense of smell, because I just treasured every aspect, every smell experience was just, a jolt of good feeling hormones. I just reveled in my sense of smell. And I think that will be, I would like to think that would be in your future too. But I do think that, there is this period, this kind of doldrums where you feel like nothing is happening. And, I want you to have hope that will take a long time to pass, but it will pass, and you will feel better someday. I think, and I'm sure you've all heard me say this before as well, that smell loss is like an injury, and you need to recover from an injury or a scar that you have to recover from. And you might look in the mirror and see one day that the scar is starting to disappear, but you wouldn't look in the mirror and say, when is this scar going to go away? It's part of you, and it's part of your history. And one day you will look in the mirror and say, I'm ready to go out and face the world. And you will do that with a full heart and not a half full one. So for anybody else who's listening and who's feeling stuck tonight, you've got all of our sympathy. But I do hope that, in time things will improve. We are still, of course, really lacking in treatments, but I know there's some really, really interesting things going on right now in research. And as soon as we are able, we will bring those to you. So as we finish up, so thank you. It's not really an evening where we'll be taking too many questions, but do join us in 2 weeks when I will have the wonderful Professor Claire Hopkins, who is going to be coming in and talking to us about the latest, what's going on in the world of smell loss. She's been a wonderful supporter of Absent, so I'm really looking forward to seeing her. And I would just like to say to Stephanie Emmons, I forgot to mention your last name in the beginning when I introduced you. So to Stephanie Emmons, Susan Spall, and Jen Stasio, I'd like to say thank you very much for coming on tonight and telling us your stories. And to all of you in the audience, I'm so glad you could be here, or now or whenever you catch up. So that's it from us. Good night, everyone. Thank you very much for your contributions, and see you in 2 weeks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
night.
Bye.